begin. I'd say the clock on the wall says it's time to go, but I don't actually see a clock on the wall, so I'm making it up. My smartphone says it's time to go. Welcome. My name is Neil Spiller. I'm in the Office of Operations at Federal Highways in Washington, D.C. I'll be moderating this session. You've heard earlier in this room from both of these presenters, but they are so very talented. They have more to say and more to give us, and we're very interested in hearing this. We're going to hear two presentations over the course of an hour. Jerry Gluck is going to give us an overview of the why and what of access management, and Karen Dixon is going to give us some more in-depth. She gave you just a teaser and a taste of the AMAG earlier, but she'll be getting to it in depth and even has promised to go through some of those spreadsheets, those worksheets that said were becoming very popular for the AMAG. So let's listen to them instead of me. And I will introduce Jerry Gluck, who's a senior manager with AECOM in New York. He has more than 30 years of experience specializing in transportation and traffic, obviously. He's a subject matter expert in this area, including access management, traffic impact studies, highway operations, system analysis in both private and government sectors. He's directed major studies at statewide and regional corridor levels. He has researched major transportation data collection and analysis efforts, and he has a wide range of transportation planning projects. I've known Jerry for a number of years through the access management community and now on the committee. So I give you Jerry Gluck.
Okay, thank you, Neil. So most of what I'm going to present is from either NCHRP Report 420, Impacts of Access Management Techniques, or from the NCHRP Synthesis 404, State of the Practice in Highway Access Management. I'm going to cover what is access management, some of the design elements, some contemporary practices that were identified in the synthesis, and then be happy to answer any questions you have. So most people think of access management more in the context of driveways, but it really goes beyond that and involves additional features such as signals, medians and openings, as well as access in the vicinity of freeway interchanges. But a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. So rather than try to explain what access management is, I think it's more beneficial to illustrate what happens if you do not manage access. And it looks like a very simple situation, relatively low volume road. You have an interchange, 4-lane roadway, looks pretty innocent, tranquil. But what happens is there are decisions being made, for example, allow this development to go in with parking in front of the business that actually backs up onto the roadway. Allow, it could be a gas station to go in over here, which is very close to the freeway ramp, and very limited, if any, corner clearance. But in a situation like this where the volumes are low, it really doesn't matter that much, you would think. But once those decisions are made, a precedent is set. The next guy who comes in with an access permit is going to say, look, my neighbor has it, why can't I get it? And one thing we found in the synthesis was about 30% of the incidents where there is some kind of confrontation between the agency reviewing a permit and the person not happy with the request, 30% is related to the applicant saying, my neighbor has that, why can't I get it too? But here you see what starts to happen as more development goes in, with very limited, if any, access management. An open access here like we saw before, 3 driveways where maybe 1 would be sufficient. Volumes are picking up, more signals are going in, 3 signals within a very short distance of one another. And then it gets compounded. Again, one decision builds on another. One thing I could guarantee, there was no plan that resulted in this happening. And let me ask, based on your driving around, wherever you live, is that such an uncommon situation? Right? It's very, very common, too common. And they're all examples of a lack of access management, where things just evolve, things happen, decisions are made without really thinking about the longer term picture. So what do we have here? This is almost like a Where's Waldo of access management. So we have 5 signals in a very short distance. How do you achieve any kind of signal progression? You really can't. We have frequent access points or open access. What are the safety implications? What are the operational implications? What's the life of this road? From a business perspective, if I own this business here and the traffic can't get in or out, am I going to be happy? If I'm a consumer and I wanted to shop in this business, would I go there? Not unless I was driving by. If I was coming off the ramp, then I would turn in. But if it was a discretionary type of purchase, hell no, I would avoid that place. In terms of median, there is no median treatment. So basically, each and every driveway that's there is full movement. Right in, right out, left in, left out. And there's older research that was done that basically showed the crashes at driveways, 70% are related to the left turn movements. No auxiliary lanes, no rights in, right turn lanes or left turn lanes. So any movement that's made to turn in or out obstructs the through movement. So what does it translate to? This is a graph that we developed as part of the research done for NCHRP Report 420. And basically what it shows is the horizontal axis is the access density, access points per mile. The vertical axis is the crashes per million vehicle miles traveled. And it's interesting to note, independent of the location where we got the data from, there's a consistent pattern that shows as the number of access points increases, the crash rate increases. Now you might say, but wait a minute, how come there are different slopes, there are different places where the lines fall on the graph? What we attributed it to was different reporting procedures in the different agencies, as well as different accident or crash reporting thresholds. But the pattern is the same. So this was based on a synthesis of what we found. But as part of that research, we also took it another step. We compiled crash records from about 7 different states, amounting to about 38,000 crashes. And we compiled the data, and this graph compares total access points per mile with the crash rate, and it's by cross-section. So you can see there are 3 different lines here, depending upon what the cross-section is. And again, no surprise in terms of first thing, as the access density increases, as the number of access points increases, the crash rate increases, irrespective of the cross-section. And the other unsurprising fact is that the crash rate associated with a non-traversable median is lower than for the other 2 cross-sections. Again, if you have a median, a driveway is generally limited to right in, right out. The left turns in and out are eliminated. It's also interesting to see that the undivided had a higher crash rate than the 2-way left turn lane. Presenting the data in a different way based on the access density versus the signal density, we see a similar type of pattern. Again, the access density increase translates to a crash rate increase. But what this shows as well is as the signal density increases, the crash rate goes up. So, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Here we go. So as you could expect, the lower signal density has an associated lower crash rate. As the signal density increases, you could expect higher crash rates. And we actually, as part of the NCHRP Report 420, came up with a way to calculate if you have a certain number of signals per mile, this is what the increment in crash rate you could expect. So that's what we're trying to address in access management. That's the what, the why, and now this is the what. Why? Because we want to improve safety, we want to improve operations, we want to improve the life of the roadway. We also want to try to keep the business owners along the corridor happy by maintaining for some level of access and egress. So there are certain design elements that we include, and this is not an all-inclusive list. I think it was Mark who indicated there are like 70 different access management techniques, and they could be categorized in different ways. But these are the ones I've chosen to just address as part of this presentation due to the time limitations. So when we look at access spacing, this is unsignalized access spacing, what could we do? We could try to reduce the number of curb cuts. We could also try to better design the curb cuts, what Jim Gaddis had presented before. If the driveway isn't designed properly, vehicles turning in could slow down the traffic behind them. But on the other hand, because we're in a multimodal world, we have to be sensitive to the fact that, okay, we provide a greater turning radius, we provide an auxiliary lane, now there's a greater distance for pedestrian to cross. So as with everything else in life, it's a matter of balancing, coming up with the right balance between maintaining traffic, yet adequately, reasonably providing for other users of the roadway. The other thing to avoid, just again emphasizing this, not only is it important to manage the number of driveways, it's also important to not have open access, because there are almost an unlimited number of conflict points when the access is open like that. And forget about a roadway that allows backing up from a driveway. Basically, the roadway becomes an extension of the driveway. And I live in an area where it's a 40-mile-per-hour roadway, six-lane road, 3 lanes each direction. And there's a diner that has that kind of parking. It's incredible. In terms of maintaining spacing in freeway interchanges, here it's an issue of corner clearances, specifying a minimum. This is probably below the minimum. I think Federal Highway does have a standard, and this is probably less than the standard to maintain for adequate safety and operations. In terms of signals, the more movements you have, the higher the volume of movements you have, the greater the cycle length. And the greater the cycle length, the more difficult it is to progress. And that's compounded by the fact here of the signal density, as well as there is no supporting grid system. There are no alternate facilities. You want to go from point A to point B in this corridor, you have to use that roadway that's shown. There's no back way to go for reverse frontage or backage road. So everything is clustered on the arterial. And median treatments. I think it was Gary Socolow in Florida DOT who said medians are probably the most important or an important access management technique. Because again, it restricts where you have left turn access and it minimizes the conflict points that you have. In addition to the median treatments, here putting in left turn lane or right turn lane would have been helpful as opposed to the turning traffic backing up the through lanes. In terms of contemporary practices, in the synthesis report, from the surveys we did, from the literature search we did, we had identified 8 different state DOTs with 10 different contemporary practices. And they ranged from administrative things that were done, like the permitting system, to an access classification system that was done, to how they expanded their program. And there are two examples that I want to go through with you. Louisiana and New Jersey. Two states almost at opposite ends of the spectrum. You have New Jersey, very high density state, but they have an access code so that the DOT has the statutory authority. And Louisiana DOTD, which at the time we did the synthesis, really didn't have much statutory authority. So these are two examples of, one is bottoms up, Louisiana DOTD, and the other one, New Jersey DOT, is top down. One in the case of Louisiana, where the grassroots people, the practitioners, the permit people, the traffic engineering people, the design people, got together and did something. And New Jersey is top down, where the DOT had the statutory authority. So in the case of Louisiana, DOTD did want to do more and enhance their access management program, but they were meeting opposition along the way. So what they came up with, and they were willing for us to share it in the synthesis report, they called it flying under the radar. They basically came up with a program, what they considered a phased approach, to develop these different policy memoranda that would help their people administer the program, expand the program, and they put it together in a toolbox. And there were key issues that they had identified up front, and these are the building blocks, the three initial building blocks that you could see that they started with. And they put together these memorandum with an eye towards being a similar format so that they could be compiled into a single document to present ultimately the DOTD policy. Then they built on those three building blocks a few more, mainly related to driveways. And what they were able to do by showing the benefits of access management, by showing the benefits of the policy that they developed relating to roundabouts, relating to medians, relating to driveways, they're actually able to win the support of the decision makers, and they were able to get an access connections policy. Switching gears, New Jersey DOT. So here you have to picture, New Jersey DOT has an access code that's built on a state highway access management act. The state legislature in New Jersey in the late 1980s recognized this can't continue. We picture New Jersey, right? Very densely developed, traffic congestion wherever you go. The legislature recognized that, so they established the act that gave New Jersey DOT a lot of authority to implement spacing criteria, a classification system, access management plan provisions, and also provisions relating to what was referred to as non-conforming lots. Now, let me emphasize, this is very unique. I don't think there's another state, or at least I'm not aware of it. So if you know of any other state that has this authority, I would really be interested to know. And the only reason they could do this in New Jersey is because they have the statutory authority to back it up. And the basis for the legislature including this provision was a situation that we see all the time. You have an arterial, and basically you have each narrow property requesting its own driveway. And in situations it could be even worse where you have a flag lot. So here, these other properties are probably limited in terms of how much traffic they could generate. But when you have these flag lots, who knows how much traffic? So New Jersey DOT has the authority to establish what they call vehicle use limits. Vehicle use limits. They would never say they have land use authority, because they don't. They're a transportation agency. It's the local government, the county, whomever has the land use authority that can manage the type of land use that goes in. But what New Jersey DOT can manage based on its statutory authority relating to access management is the amount of traffic that would be generated by that development. So that's a very important distinction to make. New Jersey DOT is not a land use agency. They're managing the traffic that would be entering onto their state highway system. And it's also important to note that for purposes of the non-conforming lot, the access spacing is measured differently than it would be. The access spacing for purposes in New Jersey are used for determining conformance or non-conformance with the spacing criteria. Where the driveway actually gets located is based on the specific site conditions. But this would be the actual measurements between Lot 2, which is the applicant, and Lots 1 and 3, mid lot to mid lot. The required spacing according to the code exceeds the actual for Lot 1, for the spacing between Lot 2 and Lot 1. Therefore, it would be considered a non-conforming lot. The amount of traffic that would be allowed would be based on how much deficient they are in terms of the spacing, as well as the area of the lot and whether the lot is in an urban or rural area. But the provisions that New Jersey DOT established do allow for higher limits if there's alternative access or shared access. And that concludes the presentation, and the synthesis report's available online as a PDF, and NCHRP report 420 is also available online as a PDF. Are there any questions, or please?
So, New Jersey has a non-conforming status. How do they go about enforcing it? It's easy to have regulations, but when you get to the enforcement part, I know our state struggles with that. I'm sure others do as well.
Well, you see, when the okay, let me repeat the question. How is the non-conforming lot provisions, how are they enforced? And when the access permit is submitted, that situation gets flagged in terms of the spacing for the specific roadway where the development would be located on is based on the posted speed. And once the measurements are made to the adjoining driveways or the frontage to the adjoining properties, it's noted that the spacing cannot be achieved. Spacing criteria cannot be achieved. And therefore, it's considered a non-conforming lot. It's stamped, and therefore, the land use or the trips associated with the requested land use are calculated using ITE trip generation, or if there are other sources, those could be used if they're accepted by DOT. So it's pretty self-enforcing based on the day-to-day procedures that DOT has dealing with access permits.
And if the trips go higher and higher.
Well, that's always a problem, right? A traffic impact study could be done for a large development. And yeah, there might be situations where the actual development, when it's built, generates more traffic. There might be situations where it generates less traffic. That's something nobody knows for sure. Any crystal ball we have has limited accuracy to it.
Maybe one more question here?
I guess sort of related to that question, when sites are being redeveloped in New Jersey, at what point does the DOT get to weigh in on it? Like, if it's just a municipal approval, is there any way when sites are increasing their traffic because there's development that they get dragged into? Or is it only when they need to apply to work on the right?
Well, that's a very good question. Okay, question is, when does New Jersey DOT get pulled in if it's a redevelopment?
Yes.
The New Jersey Access Code only applies to the state highway system. If there's a development that is proposed off the state highway system and they're not requesting any access off the state highway system, it could be a short distance away. It's not subject to New Jersey DOT review.
And if they're not working in the right of way, could they claim that?
No, as long as there's access to the state highway system, New Jersey DOT would be involved. Now, logically speaking, if you have a development that's going in just off of the state highway, and it's going to be impacting the state highway, the locals would have the wherewithal to involve New Jersey DOT, and New Jersey DOT would get involved. But in that situation, it would be up to the locals to request or require certain access management provisions, because DOT could not request any access management improvements off of the state highway system. If it's on the state highway system, then there's a whole calculation of fair share. If I'm building a project on the state highway system and there's going to be a certain deterioration in levels of service, I'm obligated to pay my fair share towards mitigating that impact. On the other hand, I take that same development, I put it off the state highway system, I no longer have that obligation. So it would be up to the locals to do that.
Jerry, thank you.
Okay, thank you.